Live It. I'm your host, Renee Kranz. Across from me today in the studio, I have Dr. Chris Burgwald.
Hi, Renee.
Hi, Chris. We haven't had you, I can't remember when the last time I had you in as our guest.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it's been a little bit.
It's been a few.
People are like, hey, when is Burgwald going to be our guest?
Oh, for sure. I'm sure you've been getting the emails just pouring in. I think it may have been after the Eucharistic Congress.
Oh, yeah, I bet it was. Yep.
So,
I think
yeah.
that. And you had a couple people with you, so
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
like it was you by yourself. Okay, so this is going to be an interesting conversation. We're going to talk about moral bracketing. And everybody's like, huh? What is that? Which is kind of what I was thinking. But so I brought this topic up because I've seen this a couple of times in a couple of different places. And I was like, I'm not really sure I understand what this is, but it feels like it's something we should maybe talk about because we all do this, I think. We're going to find out.
Okay.
We're going to talk to these so-called experts.
Wow. Why am I here? You couldn't find anybody else.
Couldn't find anybody else.
Expert.
And you're just down the hall, so
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so you know what, Chris? You haven't done this for a while on Catholic Views because we just talked to you in Biblical Bites, and we don't really. Who are you?
Oh, that's a fair question.
Yeah.
So my role, which is what I do, but not who I am.
Right.
Is Director of Discipleship Formation for the diocese. I've been with the diocese for over 22 years now. Most of that time is specifically in adult formation, but for the last 3 years, it's been 3 years. And yet some of my colleagues
that we can't get your title right?
Yeah. That have just been discipleship formation, but of course working with the rest of the Office of Discipleship and Evangelization. Father Scott is our leader, Brenda Mitzel, Hector Bautista, and our great Edmonds. Love working in this diocese. I'm from central Minnesota originally, but Jermaine and I have been here. We have 5 kids. So Jermaine and I have been married for 25 years as of this past summer. We have 5 kids from 20 down to 12. And we really didn't, to be honest, didn't think that Sioux Falls would end up being the final destination, so to speak, after graduate school. But now I hope it is the final destination.
Here you are.
Here I am 22 years later, and I hope the Lord doesn't ask me to move because we do love it here. Love the work. Love the people I get to work with, most of them at least.
Most of them?
All of them.
Likewise.
But we love this as a place to raise our family.
Yeah. And you have a sacred theology.
Doctorate in sacred theology.
Doctorate in sacred theology.
Yep. Yep,
Yes.
from the Angelicum in Rome, which is the Pontifical University of St. Thomas Aquinas is the full name.
Okay.
St. Thomas Aquinas is titled the Angelic Doctor because his intellect is so powerful. It's like an angelic intellect. So the Angelic Doctor, so Angelicum.
Okay, this is a little off topic, but I have to ask this question because I've been wanting to ask somebody this question. Is everything that Thomas Aquinas said correct?
No.
Okay, but yet you can still be a saint and still be a doctor of the
sure.
church. Because
yeah.
I've heard some things like they're like, well, Aquinas thought this, and we aren't, that's really not. And I was like, okay, wait, like we hold him in such high esteem, and yet he can be wrong.
Yeah. So what? And it's helpful to clarify there. So, the things that Thomas seemed to have been wrong about are things that at his time were not known with certainty.
Right.
So St. Thomas Aquinas. So every doctor of the church holds to what the Catholic Church at their time formally teaches.
Right.
But there's growth in understanding. So it's not so much that we are adding new doctrines, but we just have greater clarity about the teachings that Jesus gives us over time in a way that when it can be an open question for a time where we're not sure if there are limits, but within those limits, it's we know it's not C or D, but it could be A or B.
Right.
But then over time we realize, because of these connections, nope, it's got to be A.
Well, and I feel like one of those things was around when does life begin?
Yes, because
At
the
the time,
famous
we didn't have the
example,
science.
right? The biology, because that connects to the Immaculate Conception.
Right.
So because of Thomas's, because of the lack of understanding at the time of the true nature of human development, embryonic human development, that got his theology of Mary. He believed, just a question of when ensoulment happens.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to think about that. Even saints can be wrong.
Even saints can be wrong. The key there is do they accept what the church teaches, and they all do.
Right. Okay. So sorry about that. That squirrel.
No problem.
Okay. So can you start by identifying what someone might mean by moral bracketing.
Yeah. So
Possibly.
actually, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Why are you interested in this?
So I read about it in if anybody knows who George Weigel is, in one of his columns, he was talking about this, and it kind of just jumped out at me like, okay, what does that mean exactly? And I can't even remember the context in which he talks about it, but I was like, what does that mean exactly? And do I do it? Do we all do it? Like, what is this thing?
Yeah. So so it is helpful to understand the context where Weigel used it originally. So this is a column from earlier this year. He was talking about some of the formal ecumenical dialogues that the Catholic Church is part of internationally, but then also at the national level, where we're in ecumenical dialogue is always between Christians, to clarify. So the Catholic Church at various levels is in conversation with other Christian leaders.
Right.
So leaders of the among Lutherans, leaders among Methodists and Baptists and Anglicans
Orthodox
and so on.
and,
All those. Well, a lot of people have noticed that. So actually, and many of those conversations have actually been very fruitful, very productive. We've realized that. A lot of what seemed to be real disagreement wasn't as significant as we thought it was, going back to the Protestant Reformation, right? So it's partly just using terms and differently, using different terms, all those things. So it's not all just semantics and just mere misunderstanding. There are still real differences of opinion, differences of understanding of what Jesus' teachings are. But we realize, okay, it's not as much. It looks like a massive boulder of disagreement. Well, no, it's a big rock. I mean, it's a big rock, but it's not the massive boulder that we thought it was, right? So there's been great progress. At the same time, unfortunately, with a lot of those dialogue partners, those other Christian traditions that we're in conversation with about things like justification and the sacraments, and at the same time that we're doing that, when it comes to moral issues, they're going completely off base, off course, completely off course.
Some of them are, yes.
Some of these dialogue partners. So where they're not just accepting but endorsing ways of life that even in their tradition have always been understood to be spiritually harmful, damaging, sinful. Now they're saying, well, no, this is a good thing. Right. So this is sort of left the Catholics in these conversations. We're like scratching our heads, like, okay, it's great that we're arriving at greater common understanding around the sacraments and justification and so on. But in the meantime, you're going completely off base from the Christian tradition for 2,000 years, that even since the Reformation, to use the Reformation example, it's Protestant examples, where we've all been in agreement, because this has been the constant unanimous tradition. Right. And now, so it really has become great. We're resolving some of our disagreements, but you're creating new ones by your embrace of modern lifestyles. Okay. So that's kind of where it came from. Yeah. Its application more broadly, because I don't know about you, Renee, but even me with my doctorate, I'm not involved in formal ecumenical dialogue. Right, no. I have conversations with some of the Lutheran leaders from time to time, as an example, but not for. But what does this mean on a daily basis? Yeah. Many of us, I don't know if it's all of us, to be honest, but we can also practice some moral bracketing. I think there's probably a couple different applications to the average Christian or Catholic we could talk about. But to me, the most serious is, well, isn't it just important that I believe in Jesus? But that doesn't mean that I have to go along with all these other insert controversial moral teaching here. Okay. You know what I'm saying? So is that a little bit like the term we like to use, the cafeteria Catholic? Is it a little bit like that? It's a little bit like that. It's where, so in a Catholic context, I go to Mass. Maybe I'm a praying person. I believe that Jesus is God. But I don't really believe all of the church's moral teachings. So the distinction, so Weigel, moral bracketing, so bracketing off moral teachings from other more dogmatic teachings, if you will. Teachings about who God is, as opposed to moral teachings about how we're called to live.
Okay. So a couple examples could be, and maybe you have some in mind, but it could be being okay with abortion or
same-sex marriage, homosexual lifestyles in general, contraception. To be honest, as you can see, this tends to happen around questions of sexual morality.
But it could also be around euthanasia.
Yep. Life issues.
Yep. Those kind of things. Okay. So, do you have any other examples, or are those really those are really the ones that it comes down to? Okay. Yeah. So it's not really anything like I don't know how moral it is, but speeding.
It's not. No.
It's not those little. It's the bigger issues do tend to be around life issues, sexuality issues. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah,
think of
those are the two biggest categories.
Could it also be things like immigration, or is that really a different thing because there's not a hard and fast dogmatic teaching, or maybe dogmatic probably isn't the right word. Moral teaching. From the church
there are. There are moral teachings, but the application to concrete circumstances. This is where a number of years ago there were a lot of conversation around what we're talking here about specifically about things that are intrinsically evil.
Right.
Always and everywhere. You can have different policy proposals as a good Catholic about how to deal with a large influx of immigrants from other countries. Right. Good Catholics can have different ideas in terms of what's the best thing to do.
Same with caring for the poor.
Yeah.
You can have different methods of doing that.
Yep. Okay. But I would still say even in those examples though, that's part of what it means to be Catholic.
Right. Yeah.
So this is actually just having thought of it for a minute.
Okay.
Your immigration example is actually a good one.
Okay.
Caring for the poor is a good one because as Catholics, we should be concerned about how not just I personally, but how as we as a society, as a civilization, as a culture, as states and nation of states, we should be concerned with how we handle those sorts of issues. That's part of what it means to be Catholic. Now, the specific solutions, that's where you might have good. But there can be a moral bracketing where, what's important to me is that we just go to Mass and that we pray and all that other stuff. Other people, no.
Right.
We should not set aside. So this is, again, Weigel's usage. When you bracket it off, you're like, I'm going to set this aside.
Right.
No.
We can't do that.
We can't do that.
Okay. So really, as Catholics, we have to actually think about everything.
Yep.
And not just the one thing. Okay.
Yep.
So, why does it matter? Okay. To me, it seems like it might be helpful. It might be helpful sometimes to set aside moral issues, to be able to talk to people, to engage people about some of these issues. So is that a bad thing to do, or is that helpful? But then, can you bring it back? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I think the bracketing of an issue, and again in the context in which it's usually used, is a problem because that doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't matter. Now, if you're talking about a matter of timing, this is definitely a real thing. There are some issues that they make a lot more sense when you accept or when you recognize the truth of other teachings. So there are some fundamental teachings.
Yeah.
So here's my sort of overarching metaphor for this, and I think I got this from Pope Benedict XVI. I think he's the one who came across this metaphor. So you and I right now are next to a beautiful cathedral, the Cathedral of St. Joseph, Mother Church for the Diocese of Sioux Falls. And like many churches, the Cathedral of St. Joseph has stained glass windows on the outside. Right. What does stained glass look like when you're looking at it from the outside, Renee?
It looks dark.
It's black. You can't really see what it is. You only see the beauty, the brilliance of stained glass from where?
From the inside.
From the inside.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful metaphor there. There are a lot of churches teachings, frankly, I would say, including moral teachings, but not just moral teachings. Think of like some of the problematic issues, teachings for a lot of people, maybe purgatory, maybe Mary, maybe the role
Eucharist.
of the Pope, maybe the Eucharist, maybe confession. for a lot of people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, it's only when you quote unquote go inside the church that you see how beautiful those teachings are. Mm-hmm. When you're standing outside the church and you're looking at these teachings from outside, they look dark and bleak and dreary.
Right.
But it's when so in this using this metaphor, to go inside the church means, I trust the church. I don't get it. I'm looking at the outside. I don't get it, but I'm willing to go inside and trust in the church's teaching authority.
Right.
And then when you do that, like when you shift that mindset of like, I don't know, but to I don't get it, but I'm going to accept it.
Right.
You go inside and you look at, oh my gosh, it's beautiful. That's not always instantaneously, but that happens.
Right.
So there can be people where I'm not going to lead with a moral issue that or any a dogmatic issue either that's really a challenge for them. I'm going to try to get them to the point where they can recognize the church's teaching authority. And then, so I'm not bracketing off permanently. It's more a matter of strategery. About what like what's most prudent in terms of what to talk about first with this person.
Right. Okay. So, how do you, when you talk about being inside the church, so how do you do that when you're like, okay, I'm going to be open and I'm going to be inside the church? Because I know there's some things that Vatican II has to say about this that you had mentioned to me. I don't know what they are, but I'm sure you're going to share them with us. But if you're maybe that Catholic who's been thinking about, well, these things don't really matter. So how, first of all, you have to have that openness to kind of go inside the church and be like, okay, I want to see what this is. How would you suggest someone go about that besides just go inside the church?
So something that we talk about a lot on Catholic Views, that I talk about a lot on Ignition, the church's proposal, what the church, not just proposal, the church's assertion is everything that she teaches is rational.
Right.
So therefore, by investigating, if you have an open mind and you apply your intellect, the tools of human reason, to any Catholic doctrine, given enough time, and again, if you're open, you'll recognize the truth of it. I say all the time, you don't have to check your brain at the door of the church. In fact, you shouldn't. The church wants you to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. Yeah. And St. Paul says, be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Mm-hmm. So my proposal to somebody is, so first of all, you have to be open.
Yeah.
If you're just like, no, I don't believe it, well, there's nothing I can do.
Right.
But if you're like, okay, I don't get it, but I'm open. Mm-hmm. Then I would say, so what do you do? Well, we're blessed in a time with all sorts of resources where you can explore the truth of the Catholic Church's teachings. Mm-hmm. If you have somebody to approach, maybe a priest, well, whether you're Catholic or not, maybe there's a local priest you could talk to. Maybe you could talk to the diocese.
There's a doctor in the house.
But there's all sorts of online resources from just an easy one for things like this. Catholic Answers website, helpfully titled Catholic.com. Yep. Generally speaking, I find them to be a very helpful resource.
Yeah. Okay. So part of the reason this really matters to regular Catholics, we have a couple minutes left, is something Vatican II said. And maybe you can talk about that a little bit, about not divorcing our faith from our real lives.
So, Gaudium et Spes, one of the, I don't think it's the last, but one of the final documents to be approved, the Pastoral Constitution of the Church in the Modern World, said that this is just based on different translations, the great drama of our time is the divorce between the faith we profess and the lives we live. One of the big things that Vatican II was trying to do was make our faith pervade our entire life.
Right.
Not just when
one
I'm
hour
doing
on Sunday.
Not just 1 hour on Sunday, not just Sunday and my personal prayer time, but for every aspect of my life to be enleavened, so to speak, by my Catholic faith.
Yeah.
We see this like in the Book of Revelation, which is really hard to understand. I'm going a series on Ignition right now.
Oh yeah, check it out. It's awesome.
Talking about Jesus' words to some of those churches in Asia Minor, he's rebuking them. He's calling to them to repent because they might believe all the things they should believe, but their practices are screwy.
Right.
They're not in accord with what he taught. We have to integrate. So Christianity is not just a philosophy.
Right.
It's not just a set of ideas, it's a way of life,
Yeah.
which includes ideas and, if you will, a philosophy. But we have to bring both of them together. We can't just bracket off issues of how to live and we'll just live however you want. No, our faith informs everything.
Yeah. That's kind of really how I think I see us doing the moral bracketing more now, is more of a, well, I'm Catholic and I believe all that stuff, but I'm not going to really live that way. We've become very bad at living our faith.
Yep.
And in Jesus' time and for hundreds of years after, it was quite the opposite. They lived that faith every hour of every day.
Maybe some other episode of Catholic Views, we could talk about why that is.
Why we do that.
Why do we do that?
Oh, yeah.
And what do we do about that?
Yeah, that would be great because I don't know. Until I came to work here, actually probably the year or so before I came to work here was better. But before that, it was just like, Mass on Sunday. I was regular Catholic, Mass on Sunday, maybe you do something. But otherwise, my life was very separate from the two.
I think the short answer, and this will be a surprise to you, having gotten to know each other over the last several years, it's because we don't see the moral teachings as the path to happiness. I think that's a big reason. We don't see how that's relevant to my life. It looks hard and difficult, and I don't want to.
And mean.
And mean. I think Chesterton said, it's not that the Catholic Church has been tried and found wanting. The Catholic Church has been tried and found difficult.
Or not tried at all. One of the two. I hate to add on to Chesterton. He knows what he's talking about. Right. Okay. Well, that was all very helpful. I think we should talk about that other piece at some point, maybe after Christmas.
Sounds good.
Thanks for being here, Dr. B. I really appreciate it.
Happy to.
Yeah. If you haven't found us on social media yet, you can find us at Facebook, Instagram, X, and YouTube anytime at SF Diocese. That's it for us today. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Catholic Views.